This is Scott.
This is Rebecca.
And we're the CEOs of Hardy Party of
5.5. It's not really a company, it just sounds cool.
And if you're looking for a normal family, well, you've certainly come to the wrong place.
So keep your arms and legs inside the vehicle at all times, and let's see where this roller coaster takes us.
Hey, Scott.
Hey, Rebecca.
How's it going?
I'm doing pretty good.
Are you?
Today's the day.
Today's the day.
I've been waiting for this one.
Yes, you have been so excited because this is an interview with like one of your biggest man crushes.
Yeah, top 5 man crush today.
Top 5? Wow.
I think so, yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
So what's exciting is that we just had a giveaway on our last podcast, and we are about to have their giveaway.
We are?
We are.
Whoa.
Here is what we're giving away.
So cool.
We have 3 of these books.
Yep.
This guy right here, Erik Weihenmayer, he's on our podcast today.
Yeah.
It is the most fascinating conversation. I really enjoyed it. I was finally so happy to get to meet your man crush finally.
Yeah.
And
I was right about everything, wasn't I?
Yes, you were totally right about everything.
Yeah.
This podcast is also available on YouTube. So if you want to see a video of this book I'm holding up, you should click on over to YouTube and watch it there. It's also signed.
Yeah.
Yes. And we have 3 of them.
Erik sent them out for us. He was gracious enough to do that.
And it is so good. He also has a documentary called The Weight of Water. Mm-hmm. It's on Amazon. And then this wonderful book. And this book is also an organization called No Barriers. So we're going to jump right in with a video of Erik's awesome things he's done, climbing Mount Everest and kayaking the Grand Canyon. Watch this video and then listen to our awesome conversation with Erik.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I'm just catching up. I was in Scotland for 2 weeks. I dropped my son off at college, and I said, I'm going to treat myself to a fun trip. So I went and biked across Scotland with my tandem bike.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
And then we went climbing on the north coast of Scotland with my friend Timmy O'Neill and some local friends. And we climbed these, what they're called sea stacks. They're like these big sandstone towers that jut right out of the North Atlantic. So they're really crazy. Some of them you have to swim to.
Oh my gosh.
Climbing. Yeah.
So this is Arjun, right?
That's Arjun. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
and
Arjun
so
just left for college.
Yeah. Where's he going to school?
He's going to University of Vermont. So I was psyched when he picked that because I love Vermont. It's so pretty up there and great biking and great climbing and amazing ice climbing in the winter. So I'm being very selfish when I say I'm glad he went to school there. I think he was thinking that, Vermont, Burlington is a little bit similar to near where we live, which is near Boulder. So it's kind of Boulder east.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're in Golden, right?
Yeah, I'm in Golden, which is like 20 miles maybe south of Boulder.
Yeah.
Maybe 15 miles from Denver. And it's a beautiful little community in the foothills. Front Range of Colorado is getting pretty crowded, but we have great biking and these cool little mesas that you can mountain bike on and pretty close to skiing and really good rock climbing. So, and a little creek that runs right through town that rages in the spring. So it's good kayaking. So yeah, we got a lot of adventure to be had right around here.
No, that's great.
Golden is beautiful. We ventured through there once when I guess I-70 was pretty full. We were trying to get to Keystone to ski, and we ended up taking a little detour through Golden. It is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. I like it.
Yeah.
I miss water though. There's not, like you guys are in Fort Worth. There's not a lot of water in Colorado either. Some rivers and stuff like that, but I miss oceans, and you can't have it all though.
Yeah.
Well, one of your major things that you've done is you summited Mount Everest, which you were the first blind man to do that, correct?
Yeah.
Which is crazy. So before we get into all that, tell us, what was your childhood like, and just how you grew up, where you grew up, and.
Well, we kind of grew up around the world. My dad was working in a pharmaceutical company, and so they moved him to Hong Kong. So I lived in Hong Kong for like 5 years when I was a little kid, and I loved it. It was really exotic from my perspective, and this cool island and big mountains in the middle, and really fun hiking. And we'd go out on this boat that we rented with a bunch of families. So we get it like once every couple months, and it would they were called junks, and there were these cool Chinese boats that you'd go out sailing on the South China Sea. So like I kind of grew up and got a taste of adventure, although it wasn't climbing, but it was definitely like exploring and what's around every corner. Then we moved back to Connecticut, and it was just like, hideously boring compared to Hong Kong. You're just sitting in the woods, in a house. So we had to make our own fun. So, I had a semi-normal childhood, just running around through the forest, climbing cliffs in the forest, jumping off the Devil's Glen, which was a big rock that we would jump into this river. And I couldn't see very well, so I'd point my cane, be like, there, and they'd be like, no, not there, no, not there. And I'd try to get it in the middle, and they'd go, there, that's where you want to land. And so we did a lot of adventure-y things, but like some of it was probably pretty reckless, because you have to kind of grow into this idea of what adventure is and how do you assess risk. And when you're a kid, you're just, you don't do it that well.
You just kind of throw yourself out there. So
yeah, exactly. We would jump off of roofs and out of trees, like over big piles of rocks, and land in leaves. I mean, we did like really dumb stuff, but you're kind of pliable when you're a kid. So it works.
Right. So you completely lost your eyesight in high school, maybe ninth grade, I think. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, I was losing sight. I was born with this congenital eye disease. So I knew I was going blind, but I mean, I just pushed it away,
Yeah.
I mean, people are like, you're the kind of guy that just turns into the adversity and attacks it head on. I'm like, well, sometimes. I mean, not always. When I was a kid, I just tried to ignore it and pretend it wasn't going to happen. It was like this death sentence. I didn't really even understand what blindness would be like. And so I just would turn to my friends and play in the woods and try to fit in, and then, freshman year, a week before I started my freshman year, I went fully blind, totally blind. Like I couldn't take a step. And I was like, okay, now I'm really blind. This is my life. This is freaking crazy.
Yeah.
And so, I was kind of a angry little, in Connecticut, we had these raccoons that would break in through your screen, and they would eat your garbage, and that you'd come in the middle of the night in the kitchen, and they'd be like snarling at you in the corner. And I was basically one of those little angry raccoons for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Snarling at the world, going, leave me alone,
Yeah. So what made you finally decide to move on and have a life with no barriers?
Well, I mean, essentially you're like looking at this brick wall, and you don't know how to break through it. You don't know what your life's going to be like. And, and you don't know if you're going to ever have friends or girlfriends, or, you're just thinking about, I'm never going to be able to drive a car. And so I did a lot of searching, like I don't know what my life looks like. So I was such a pragmatist. I wasn't really worried about like not being able to see beautiful sunsets and Van Gogh paintings. Although nowadays I think that'd be really cool to be able to see those things. But I was more concerned with what I was going to miss out on. I've always had this kind of FOMO disease, fear of missing out. So when I was a kid, like my brothers were going fishing, and I stood on the dock, and the guy wasn't going to take me out. And somehow it occurred to my dad, he was standing there saying goodbye, and he's like, "Did you want to go?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And so he shoved me out there on the boat, and I caught more fish than my brothers. And my brothers, one of them was seasick, and one of them had to pee. I think he almost peed in his pants, and I was having a great time. And then, so I wanted to be a part of things. I hated being on the sidelines. I think that's probably universal for a lot of people who suffer a disability. You want to experience life, right? You realize, okay, probably just maybe I have one life in front of me, and all the things I envisioned of my life are now dashed. It's like I'm going to be sitting on the sidelines, listening to life go by, this life that's just meaningless, that's passive. And even though I couldn't express that at the time, I think that was my greatest fear.
Well, you did eventually go on to have a girlfriend, and I guess she turned into your wife named Ellie. Yeah. And then you have a daughter named Emma. And then, of course, we already spoke of Arjun. Yeah. He's adopted from where?
We adopted Arjun from Nepal.
Okay, from Nepal.
Yeah.
Previously, we spoke about our son that does all the extreme sports, and he's also adopted. So we share that love together.
Yeah.
So how does Ellie and your children, like, how do they manage you in extreme sports? I mean, do they just worry all the time? Are they just used to it? How do they react to this?
Oh, they're like, whatever. Dad's going off again. Yeah. Yeah. What are you doing now? My son will be like, where were you? And I'm like, I was in Scotland climbing huge rock faces. He's like, oh, that's cool.
So totally no surprise anymore.
Yeah, it becomes totally normal.
Yeah. What about it first? I mean, when you first told her you were going to climb Mount Everest, like,
I had been, so I was a teacher for 6 years, and I could have taught forever. I loved it. I was teaching sighted kids at a middle school. I taught English and math. But I got into climbing. I went climbing the first time in this rehabilitation center, and they taught you how to use a cane and learn Braille, but they also had a rec program. And so at the time, blind people were left out of ball sports and in PE class. So my dad would drive me 3 hours up to this rec program for the blind. And I really liked the group. And one weekend they took us rock climbing, and I loved it. It was physical. It was problem solving. It was full engagement. It was just like a lot of sweating and grunting and bleeding and it was connecting your life and fate with another human being. And I thought that this is really cool. And so at the time in Arizona, when I was teaching, I got connected with this substitute teacher, and he was a climber, and we started climbing together. And so it led to, bigger and bigger rock faces, and eventually to ice climbing, and eventually to paragliding, and eventually to climbing Mount Everest. And so it was a slow process of, figuring out, okay, what do I want to do? I had this dream to climb the 7 summits, the tallest peak in every continent. And so that was exciting to, your whole life to be this great adventure, just traveling around the world. But anyway, I left teaching and decided, with the help of my dad and some friends that said they'd help me figure it out. I became a full-time adventurer. And I've been the last 25 years making a living speaking and climbing and endorsements and blah, 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 books, movies, films. It's been really eclectic and really fun and exciting. But the family, it is hard on the family. One time I woke up and I was like, oh, my knee is killing me. If it gets any worse, I'm not going to be able to climb. And I think my wife said, good. So yeah, it's hard. You leave for months at a time. I mean, it's hard on the family. I mean, any kind of occupation is hard. Some people go off to work and are gone all day and come home late at night. For me, I go home. I'm home, and then I leave for a month or two, and then I'm back home again. So it's really a different family experience for sure.
So I was listening to the 20th anniversary you had on your podcast, the Everest team back together.
Yeah.
And just one of the things that really struck me is how tight knit your group is, like your friends and your team members. And obviously, with the things you do, you have to have like 100% confidence and trust in them. So I was just wondering, what qualities do you look for in people, and how do you just cultivate this much trust in each other when you're doing these things?
Well, one is, I mean, there's not like this perfect prescription to the people that you attract. But I mean, I do think we're sort of like, planetary bodies or something. We attract things into our orbit. And I've just been unbelievably fortunate to attract amazing people into my orbit. I guess I'm doing something right. Maybe they sense the fact that I have gratitude, that I'm really appreciative. I'm really hungry to learn and grow and experience life. And maybe it's, people who, like PV, our team leader on Everest, he had tried to climb Everest twice. He had finally reached the summit, I think his third try, maybe. And so he had a lot of experience. And he came up to me at this outdoor show and he's like, told him about myself. And he said, "Hey, you ever think of climbing Everest?" And I was like, "Well, yeah." And he's like, "You need a leader? I'll lead you up there." And he's like, I'm like, "Yeah, cool, dude." And he's like, "Yeah, bro." And, we do a lot of bros and a lot of dudes in the world. And so the next thing we were planning this trip, and and that's really what it took for me, because I needed a good, strong team around me. So we started building this team of people that PV knew, and then friends that I trusted, and we had this incredible team by the end. And we've stayed great friends. We had our 20th anniversary experience where we got together for the weekend and hung out and watched movies and went climbing, and we're still like brothers and sisters as we get older, 20 years down the road.
So how long did the journey from starting the Everest climb to making it to the summit, how long does something like that take?
Well, I went blind at 14, and then I climbed the first time at 16, and then 16 years later I was climbing Everest. So half my life training, I guess, for this experience. 2 years of intense physical training to get ready for Everest and climbing other peaks around the world.
Yeah.
And then the experience itself is probably close to 3 months, door to door, 2.5, 3 months, door to door. You get to Kathmandu, you spend a week like kind of organizing and unpacking and getting everything organized. And then you eventually fly on up to the Khumbu, which is the valley that leads you up to Everest. And that's about a 10-day trek. And then you have to rest when you get to base camp, because you're at 17,500 feet and you're feeling like crap because you haven't acclimatized yet. So you got to kind of spend a week, and then you start making these forays up the Khumbu Icefall, which is right out of base camp. It's probably the most treacherous place. It's for probably the most people that have died on the South Col, because it's just this incredibly unstable labyrinth of ice, all shifting and moving and exploding and collapsing under your feet. With every step could honestly kill you. Seracs exploding and collapsing and crushing people, and it's a very volatile ground. It's like a river of ice that's kind of moving down the mountain. So I mean, that to me was just the most intense thing I'd ever experienced. And so eventually you make it through the full ice fall, 2,000 feet. And then you start setting up your higher camps, and you make it all the way up to camp 3 usually. And then you come on back down to way down to 14,000 feet, which seems like, tropics at that point. And you rest for like 4 days, and you kind of like, it's funny, like cuts start to heal at that 14,000 foot level. At 17,000 or 18,000 feet, you'll cut your finger and it'll just ooze and bleed for a month or two. It won't ever heal because there's not enough oxygen to really sustain life up there. They call it the death zone. So anyway, you get down to 14, you supercharge, and then you charge back up the mountain feeling so good. You've just been able to breathe 4 days of oxygen.
Mm-hmm. So why do you come back down to 14? Is that just the way it is, or you intentionally come back down to 14? You
intentionally come down to 14,000 feet because there's so much more oxygen down there. You kind of supercharge, recharge your body.
So you have to
fill your body full of oxygen. And then you go back up the mountain, you just feel like a rock star. but it's the slow process of acclimatization where you're, training your body how to breathe less and less oxygen. And, like they say, I don't know, like if you just helicoptered onto the top of Everest, within a minute you'd pass out and die.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So you have to kind of train your body to be able to, you're building hemoglobin in your body that is able to absorb more oxygen.
Yeah, I almost passed out at the top of Pikes Peak, so this is probably a big no-go for me.
Everyone feels lightheaded at the top of Pikes Peak or any of the 14ers in Colorado. Yeah, I feel faint. I feel like I'm, like that kind of where you feel the world kind of just swaying in front of you.
Yeah.
I mean it's like that,
Yeah.
So can you give us an idea of what it felt like to like stand on the top of the world? What was that moment like when you got to the top?
Well, I mean, the typical thing that you might think is that you stand on top and, you like pound your chest and you're like, I've done it and my life has changed forever. But really nothing happens on a summit. You stand on this little cold lump of ice, which is an island in the sky. And you take a few pictures and you hug your friends and you hold the flag and you feel the crampons biting into the snow under your feet and the wind in your face and a little bit of sun if you're lucky. And you sense the sound vibrations. For me being blind, I listen to sound vibrations. I listen to it's called echolocation. And so you listen to the sound that you're making under, with your crampons in the snow, and just whatever sounds are out there, they float out into the atmosphere. And often in life, the sounds will bounce off of objects and come back at you. But in the summit of Everest, the sounds just move out infinitely through space. I've described it as feeling like being swallowed by sky. So it's a really intense, awe-inspiring, beautiful, scary moment. But at the same time, you got to get down because, the hardest work is going down the mountain. Going up, believe it or not, it's physically exerting, but going down is way, way more dangerous. So
really,
90% of accidents happen on the way down when you're tired. And if you fall down the mountain, you're going to tumble forever. So really all your skills come into play when it matters, when you're coming down.
How long does it take you to get to 14?
To
like 14,000 from the top.
All the way back down. It takes like 3 or 4 days. Because you kind of do this death march when you're going downhill. You just go down, 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 down.
Yeah.
So I think you make it to the South Col, which is a high camp, and then you come all the way down down the Lhotse face and down to Camp 2, and then you go all the way to base camp, and then you kind of organize and pack, and then you head a couple more days, these huge death marches all the way down to where you can fly out of the Khumbu.
It honestly sounds like there's so many small victories going up and coming down. Like you probably celebrate a lot of along the way of things that you've just accomplished, the ice river and things like that.
Oh yeah, I mean, because you cross through the Khumbu ice fall 10 times. You don't cross through it once. You don't just get through it once and go, whoa, I got through. You got to go up and down and up and down and up and down. And so like my first time through the Khumbu ice fall took me 13 hours. I mean, that's way too long to be in the Khumbu ice fall because, as I said, it's so volatile in there. Things are collapsing and stuff. And so my team was really worried about me. They're like, he's spending way too much time getting through the ice fall. So after the 10th time up and down, I broke 5 hours. So you're just getting stronger and stronger if you have, the right team and you prepare the right way.
Yeah.
So when you finally made it, your team leader, Pascal, said something to you that I think really impacted your life from then on. And he just said, don't let Everest be the greatest thing you do. So how did you react to that when he first said it? And then how did that change your life afterwards?
Well, I mean, you come down through the Khumbu ice fall and you're finally safe, you're like, wow, I'm safe. Like I remember drinking a beer at 17,000 feet. And I was just like, whoa, my head is spinning big time. This may not have been a great idea, but you're just so happy. You're in celebration mode, And so PV pulls me aside and, I think he's like just going to give me a hug and congratulate me and I'll sign his baseball cap or something. But he said, Erik, do me a favor. He said, don't let Mount Everest be the greatest thing you ever do. And it came out of the blue kind of. And I was like, well, I mean, PV, first of all, that's poorly timed advice because I want to go home. I've lost 40 pounds and I want to go home and drink hazelnut lattes and eat chocolate croissants and hear my daughter, play in the park, and feel the sun on my face in Colorado. But I mean, what he was really saying, I think, over time was he was saying, I guess something similar to what David Brooks, the columnist and thinker says. He says, is this a resume virtue or is this like a life virtue? It's like, what are you doing this for? Is it to put the trophy on the shelf or the picture on the wall and then like, just make it something that you did, something for your resume? Or is this going to become an experience that matters, that's valuable, that means something, that propels you forward and helps you learn something new about life and your own life and the world, and propels you forward to some new discovery? So every experience is a catalyst that pushes you forward to something new. And it wasn't, he was saying like something scarier or riskier or bolder, but he was just saying something that, again, is meaningful at that time of life. And so it was amazing advice because that mindset, led me to all kinds of things, kayaking and adopting Arjun and starting No Barriers. I mean, we just had our 15th, a big annual event called our Summit. And it was a in-person and virtual kind of a hybrid event. We had 7 million views from all around the world.
That's amazing.
50 countries, every state in the US represented. It's just so powerful to have one experience lead to the next and figure out what your place is.
Mm-hmm. Well, Scott and I both just finished your book, No Barriers, which is where I read a lot about Arjun in that book. And this chronicles your events of, you moved off the mountain now, and now you're in the water and you're going to solo kayak the Grand Canyon. So tell us a little bit about that training. I was fascinated by the different things you attempted there. And then of course, Lava Falls and all of that. So tell us like a little bit about the training that went into that.
Sure.
And just how different that was a flip on what you've been doing for sure.
Well, it's a bit of a misnomer to say I was soloing the Grand Canyon. Like I was in my own boat, but I had an amazing team around me,
Oh yeah.
And so they're great. I've always had great teams. I was on an ice face, actually. It was about the time when I was trying to adopt Arjun, and we're having all sorts of challenges with red tape and bureaucracy. And there's a civil war going on in Nepal, where the Maoists took over and they stopped all adoptions. And so I was struggling to bring him home, and we headed up to the Khumbu to climb this big vertical ice face called Losar. And it was really exciting, but we were bivvied. We were sleeping on the side of the ice face, and wind was just hammering down in these flimsy sleeping bags. We all had like a little tiny packet of soup. We were like hungry and like so cold. I'm like hallucinating, and it was in that experience that Rob was like, hey, kayaking is pretty awesome. It's like in the sunshine, you have rafts that can carry beer and stuff behind you. You don't have to carry everything on your back. It's pretty fun. You might want to, maybe we should, see if I can teach you a combat role. And I was like, yeah, I'd always wanted to do that. So it was just this very organic thing. We got home and Rob taught me how to do a combat role. Within a couple hours, I had the shaky roll. And then I said, hey, Rob, what do you say? Like, maybe teach me, maybe you could guide me down a couple easy rivers. And of course, it started over again, this process of, starting over with all questions, very few answers. And then we just worked our way through the process together, kind of trying to engineer ideas and guiding techniques and how the team would work and support me. And after 6 years of training, I thought I was ready for the Grand Canyon. We left for the Grand Canyon and had a successful descent down the Grand Canyon. I think it took us 20 days to kayak the whole Grand Canyon, 277 miles.
Wow.
Now in the book, you mentioned that there's a farmer that went with you, Lonnie. Can you tell us a little bit about Lonnie? Because he was cracking me up in the book. He's just a funny guy.
Oh, Lonnie's amazing. So I had met other blind adventurers. Like in the book, I wrote about this cool experience meeting Andy Holzer, who's this Austrian blind guy. I was climbing in the Dolomites and I was up a couple thousand feet up this face. And my friend says, Eric, you're not going to believe it. There's another blind guy on this ledge. I'm like, what? Anyway, this guy, Andy Holzer, he's making a documentary. Look at this blind guy climb this massive face in the Dolomites. And randomly, another blind guy pops into the film. And we climbed the rest of the face together and we became good friends. And anyway, so when I was kayaking, I heard that there was this other blind guy that was a good kayaker. And he had been down the Grand Canyon before, but he hadn't finished it. He'd gotten off like maybe 50 miles shy of the end of the canyon. Mm-hmm. And so I said, I like this guy. I met him. We kayaked together and I invited him on my trip. So the two of us were kayaking together, and his name is Lonnie Bedwell. Yes, he's a farmer from Duggar, Indiana. He's an amazing guy. Yeah. I gave him a life vest, like a PFD, which is from one of our sponsors. You obviously have a life vest that you wear around you when you're in these giant waves and rapids. And so on one of our trainings, I gave Lonnie a PFD or a life vest, and he didn't have enough room in his bag, so he wore it home. He wore it home on the plane. And so he's in his overalls, his boots, his cowboy boots, and his PFD around him in the seat. And he said, the lady next to him asked him very tentatively, like, why are you wearing a life vest on this plane? He's like, just in case of a water landing. So,
he's prepared.
So Lonnie is a trip. He is nuts. I mean, going into like Horn, these big rapids, and I'm just like terrified. My fear level is at like a 9 out of 10. I go, Lonnie, what's your fear level? He'd be like, about a 2. And I'm just like, what's wrong with you, dude?
Yeah.
So but I loved Lonnie. He's a really good kayaker.
On the documentary, he was in the documentary a lot, and I mean, yeah, he was very much like, yeehaw, let's do this.
Yeehaw, I know. See, I'm just like, people have a misperception of me, I think, because they think, oh, he's a big adventurer, he's like fearless. No, I'm scared of everything. When I was a kid, I was paralyzed by fear. And so I think that's partly why I was been fascinated by what does this process look like, where we move forward and we try to figure out how we're going to grow and evolve and connect with other people in the world and live, a no barriers life.
Yeah.
Because it didn't come so easy for me.
Mm-hmm.
So how is it different, like being on a mountainside and being in the water? Because it seemed like when I was reading the book that there was a lot more fear in the water than you had on the mountainside. So why did being kayaking generate that much?
Yeah. I mean, mountain climbing, sure, if there's an avalanche or something, it's big trouble, right? But I mean, you're just plodding very slowly up the mountain, moving slowly. You can't move that fast at high altitude. Mm-hmm. And so even very technical things, I'm pretty strong, pretty fit. So like I can hang on to a rock or hang on to an ice climb with my tools and kind of just pick my way forward through that difficult experience, kind of use some mindset to like kind of cocoon yourself in a sense of well-being, even though the mountain's raging around you. And I'd kind of learned to do that. But then I got into the river, and obviously you can drown, you can slam into things. You're moving really fast. You're moving at the pace of the river. The ground is moving underneath you. There's 4 dimensions. There's a whole nother dimension moving under your boat. And it's very reactionary. You're reacting as a blind kayaker to like things that you can't see coming. So waves are just hammering you left and right. And it's like a dance, but it's also like going into the ring with Mike Tyson. I'm dating myself. Mike Tyson has boxing a long time, but
we got you.
Yeah. But so yeah, you're asserting yourself in certain ways to be able to make the right moves and get in the right places of the river, but you're also reacting and just saying, okay, I got to ride this massive energy. And I have to be okay with that. And so that was really hard for my sort of German controlling nature, I think, of just in a way letting go and having a kind of faith in yourself and in your team that if you charge and you're aggressive and through that rapid, 9 times out of 10, you're going to get through it, but there's no certainty. And so that was just all hard, That's why I entitled our documentary and a chapter of my book with the weight of water, because it is a weight, right? All these fears and anxieties, and am I good enough? Am I going to let my team down? Did I just get lucky on Everest? And is this, I define myself as this hero, and now maybe I'm not the guy I wanted to be. All that stuff kind of becomes like crust or like a layer, and it removes you from the experience. So a lot of that story was about kayaking for sure, but it was also about trying to delayer, trying to fully, authentically experience something and grow and learn from it, and not be like a person who watches their life through a window, into the scene.
Yeah.
And kind of get to the core of who you are. Really, the experience is proving who you are to yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. And seeing if you can, the possibility of seeing if you can flourish in that environment.
Yeah.
I'd say I flourished in the Grand Canyon from time to time. Sometimes you're surviving, but man, it sure feels good when you flourish, when you get into that flow, that zone where you're just like, I'm connecting here. I'm not like this sort of scared guy, that's fighting his way down the river. Like I'm a part of this environment, and it's beautiful. It becomes this really beautiful, powerful connection. But it's a lot of work to get there.
Yeah. Oh, I can imagine.
And it's years of training and seconds of that feeling.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was impressed with, you were talking about the echoes and when you were on the mountain, but I remember in your documentary, you were just hearing how the water comes off the side of the canyon, or the rocks on the other side, and how you're just so in tune to that, and how that helped you kind of navigate where you needed to go. And I mean, that's just things that pass us by.
Well, echolocation is something blind people use. You listen to objects bouncing off of, sound bouncing off of objects and coming back at you. But in a river, like in a canyon, there's so many sounds. You're trying to decipher so much. It's like sounds are just ricocheting everywhere, and bouncing off the water and bouncing off the walls, bouncing off of rocks. It's really tricky. It's so hard to react and understand as a blind person. How to orient yourself just by, what you're hearing, what you're feeling under your boat, and what my friends are yelling at me through the radios. It's really tricky. But I remember going and scouting lava falls, and you walk up on the side of the river, and you're right, like kind of looking down at lava, and the sound there is the deepest roaring. It's like a monster just roaring from the depths of the earth, and you're like, holy shit, I'm about to go into that.
Lava Falls it's the last feature, right? Lava Falls is that the last?
Well, it's not the last feature, but it's the last big feature. It's 10 out of 10 in the Grand Canyon.
That's 10, that's right.
You can get wrecked after that, but no, once people get through lava, they're kind of up. That's the summit, and now they're kind of descending down the mountain, if you will.
Yeah, right.
So now the first time you went through lava, it didn't go quite as planned. So talk about like when you didn't make it all the way through and you decided to go back and do it again.
I mean, well, kayaking is different from climbing in the fact that like part of the success for me felt like I wanted to stay in my boat.
Yeah.
Being out of your boat and swimming blind through a rapid is like the worst thing you want to do. So it's really dangerous. So you want to stay in your boat. And so you kind of create this definition of what success looks like. And it's very personal. I mean, but for me, it was being in my boat. And so the first time through Lava Falls, I didn't have such a good run. I think I built up so much weight and pressure in myself that I kind of just fell apart a little bit. Usually I think I rise to the occasion, but in this instance, I think I was just overwhelmed by fear and sort of, I almost remember feeling like lethargic, like trying to take deep breaths, trying to get energy into my body. And I rode the slip down into lava, and I hit the first boil, and I reacted too slowly, and I was upside down. And I rolled back up, and I just, from there, it was a cascading series of being worse and worse and worse. So these giant waves come together called the V wave that knocked me over. I rolled up. I was going into these giant waves called the Big Kahuna waves backwards. I was getting wrecked. Harlan put his paddle up against one of these big waves. He was my guide in lava, and it busted his carbon fiber paddle in half and knocked him over. So he's upside down. He's not able to communicate with me. So I'm just like getting wrecked in the Kahuna waves going, where is Harlan? I don't hear anything. Where am I? Like, am I off? Am I getting crushed against the rocks canyon? Like, to the point where I'm going to drown. And I panicked and I pulled my skirt and I swam blind through lava falls. So that was my first experience through lava.
So you can say you swam lava falls and then you went back and actually kayaked lava falls.
Yeah, exactly. So I got down. You actually, when you swim, there's this tradition in kayaking where you drink a booty beer, and you guys know this, but you take your stinky, musty, waterlogged booty off your foot, and people pour beer into it, and then a shot of whiskey, and then you have to drink it out of your own boot, and it's and so I did that, but I felt so sad because I had created expectations around this trip, and I wanted to flourish in this environment. I didn't want to just squeak by the skin of my teeth, like, for me, these adventures are about sort of figuring out what's within you and how do you flourish? How do you figure out the possibilities of something and take it, as far as you can. So just surviving lava, people are like, you should be psyched. You survived, you didn't drown, you swam through, but who cares? You're past it. And I was like, no, that's something I care. I have to go back. So I woke up out of my tent the next morning, and Harlan, I said, hey, Harlan, what do you think? Maybe this is a dumb idea. Maybe this is a crazy idea, but maybe like, what could is it possible to do lava again? And he's like, I was hoping you'd say that. And so we hiked back up and we ferried across the river, which was even crazy. I wanted to back out. Just ferrying across the river, that's like pointing your boat upstream and angling your boat to the point where you can kind of like shoot across the current. And I was just getting hammered. I think I even got knocked over ferrying across the river because you have to get to the other side of the river so that you can hike again up to the top of lava. And I was just having second thoughts. And anyway, but I mustered the courage, and I remember my second run just being, sure, I was scared, but I had done it once before. I knew what the consequences were. And I said, I got to let go some of that weight. I just got to, I got to sort of connect with this moment. And so I remember under the fear, there was a sense of connection and there was a sense of gratitude. And that's what I remember as my second trip through lava, just sort of feeling joy and love for my team and connection and gratitude for just being there, being able to be in such an amazing place.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And you mentioned earlier the No Barriers Summit. Can you tell us about what the No Barriers organization is, and what's its mission? What's your mission with No Barriers?
Well, PV said, don't make Everest be the greatest thing you ever do. And so that led to all kinds of cool stuff. I got a call out of the blue by this guy, Mark Wellman, who was one of my heroes at the time. He's still one of my heroes. He's a paraplegic who was the first paraplegic to climb El Capitan. He did this 3,000-foot vertical overhanging climb by basically doing pull-ups up the rope. They estimated he did over 7,000 pull-ups in 8 days.
Word.
Wow.
So he was world famous. He met the president, and he lit the torch at the Paralympics. And I mean, he was the man. And then he said, I have another guy who's going to climb with us, Hugh Herr, who's a double leg amputee. Hugh runs the biomechatronics laboratory at MIT, building prosthetics that are just insanely sophisticated and trying to figure out how prosthetics and the human biology, how they connect and how they work together. seamlessly. So he's an amazing scientist, but he's also an amazing climber. And he climbs with these prosthetic feet. And so the three of us got to the top of this tower outside of Moab, Utah. And I just remember feeling so connected with these guys. Yeah, sure, we were all climbers and adventurers, but also I was more fascinated by how life can kind of try to pulverize you, and you have to kind of rebuild yourself and figure out how you're going to reclaim your life or reclaim something new that you just could grasp with your fingertips. You didn't know exactly what that life looked like. And so I was really fascinated by that process of rebuilding, of healing, of growing, of moving forward. And so the three of us got together and started building this, what we call, I guess, a map or a template of how you do that. And it became our No Barriers curriculum that we teach to people with challenges. And when I say challenges, it's really eclectic. It's, people who have physical challenges like me or Mark or Hugh, but also people with invisible challenges, anxiety, fear, post-traumatic stress disorder, kids who are first-generation Americans and are trying to connect, or kids in the foster care system who've just been beat down over and over and over, injured soldiers, and so the idea behind No Barriers is how do we figure out how to, break through those barriers and elevate the world in some way. So at the end of our courses, we have people take what we call No Barriers Pledge. It's like, what are you going to do with this now? Like PV asked me, what are you going to do with this?
Yeah.
So it's a pledge, and we've had people write books and start nonprofits and get jobs and lose 150 pounds. I mean, it's amazing to see what comes out of these pledges.
Yeah.
So really, you have done something greater than Everest. So
I think so.
Yeah,
I think No
definitely.
Barriers is my legacy.
Yeah.
I'm so sold on this work, and I'm so over the top about it, because for me, there's so much negativity in the world, and so much like tribalism and stuff. And what No Barriers is, it says, like, we got to lean in, man, because it doesn't matter if you're blind or if you're a veteran, or whether you're a kid in the foster care system, or whether you're like a person, working at a corporation trying to bring an idea into the world, right? We're all, if we lean in at that macro level, we can help each other, we can lift each other up, and we can really go a lot further than we could alone.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's about, the connection of how do we support each other and how do we help each other problem solve and break through those barriers in the world as a community.
Yeah. I know Scott hopes to join you on a No Barriers event.
Yeah, please.
Definitely. Love that.
We have dozens and dozens of programs, both virtual and in person, but we also have a couple big events every year that people can attend.
Yeah, and our son that lives about an hour from you probably would love that as well.
And we don't discriminate, right? Like, anyone can join, right?
Yeah.
And people are always like, oh, I'm not blind, I shouldn't join. I'm like, no, it's for everyone, because
It's for everyone.
it's an expansive definition of challenge.
Yeah.
Every human being has challenges. So everyone has a No Barriers, a yearning for a No Barriers life, I think.
Yeah, for sure. So what's next? What's next for Erik? What's your vision for the future, personally, professionally? Where are you headed?
Well, in terms of climbing, I mean, like, I'm going to run out of cartilage before I climb, like, a third or a fourth or a fifth of the things I want to climb and kayak and do all kinds of big adventures. So I'm 52, so I have a couple years ahead of me climbing and doing really cool stuff. But I really would like to make No Barriers a household phrase. I really think the world needs it, because the people, when you see real authentic people, like, just bleeding and bleeding their way forward, like, it teaches you a lot about this process of growth. The people that refuse to crawl under a rock and just say this world's not a good place, it's just beat me down too many times. And you see people continuing to kind of flail and bleed their way forward. And it's just, to me, insanely inspiring.
Yeah, it is. We talk to our kids a lot about when you put yourself in a box, and when you build up walls around you of protection, like maybe you did when you were the angry teenager, building
the angry
up those
raccoon.
walls. Yes, the angry
Yeah.
raccoon. You think you're protecting yourself, but you're really kind of putting yourself in a prison. And once you get on the other side of that wall, you see how freeing it is. It's a whole different world, and you can be so much more vulnerable. It is scary to be vulnerable, but there's freedom on the other side of that wall that you built up.
I am such a disciple of that, what you just said, because look, I don't want to put anyone down, but I think a lot of us do live in a prison. We do. I mean, we put bars around us. The world puts us there for sure.
Yeah.
But we then, grow those bars even stronger around ourselves.
Yeah.
And so No Barriers is, I think it taps into a lot of the stuff that companies and teams are working on now, which is inclusivity, right? Like, how do we make the world an accessible place where everyone can contribute their full potential to life and the world and to living a meaningful life? And how do we support people to be able to do that, to bring the best version of themselves into the world? It's really, it's the new frontier, I think.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great message and a great mission. And Erik, you're just one of my favorite people. I met you, 8 or 10 years ago. I'm a graphics operator. So you came back to look at your slides, and it was just so funny. Okay, here's what I did when I met.
I remember I had actual slides in a carousel back then, didn't I?
Well, no, it was PowerPoint.
It was PowerPoint. Now we're pretty sophisticated. We use Keynote and everything, but there was a day of being a dinosaur, actually, with like slides and a carousel.
Yeah. So when you came up to me, I said, "Oh, it's good to see you," and I'm like, "What did I just say?" And then you were like, "Oh, it's good to see you too."
Yeah.
So and then fate had it, I worked with you again like very soon after that, and you came up to me and said, "It's good to see you again, Scott." So it just made me realize, okay, this is a good dude who's not, I don't have, it kind of like we talked about the walls coming down.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, he's accessible. I don't have to worry about what I say or.
No, you don't. It's hard to offend me. I have 2 older brothers that I got a lot of beating. So if I was sensitive, I would have been in big trouble.
Yes. Such a pleasure for me to get to meet one of my husband's biggest man crushes. So
That's true.
thank you, Erik.
Awesome. Really good to spend an hour with you too.
Yes,
Okay.
we appreciate your message, and we look forward to seeing what the future holds for you. We're really excited about No Barriers and that organization, and we will definitely be keeping up with you.
Awesome. All right. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks a lot, Erik.
Bye.
What an amazing way to end season 3 of our podcast.
What an amazing way. He was so fantastic.
Incredible.
Yes. And so if you want one of these 3 copies of this signed book that we have by Erik, then you have to just share this podcast. Like, just share it and tag Party 5.5 Minute. That's it. We'll put you in a drawing. We have 3 of these books to give away. We're so excited to give away these. It's a really good book. We both read it.
Right.
It's so good.
Yep.
And you will not be disappointed. You will want to jump right out and go, like, I don't know, do something amazing.
Climb a cliff, or
I mean, even just like a small boulder in the backyard.
Go to your swimming pool. Go down deep.
Just dive to the bottom and
count
back.
To 100. Something.
100.
Yeah, you'll want to do something amazing.
Something amazing. And you will. He's very inspiring.
Yep, Erik gets you fired up and just ready to go attack life.
So like and share this podcast today.
Yep. And
tag us in at Party 5.5, and you'll be entered for a drawing for one of these 3 books, and we will get that right in the mail to you, right?
Yes, we will.
That's right. Party 5.5, over and out.
We'll see you next time.